chilling chants of "send her back" at a Trump rally, and the question becomes, is our president in fact still the leader of the free world?
Team Rising is here to take on these topics. We have Democratic strategist Roger Fisk. He's an Obama administration alum, former senior aide for communication and policy, Senator John Kerry, and Politico's White House correspondent, Gabby. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning.
So, I mean, the President of the United States, obviously, I think we've all seen this, the chants of "send her back" at the Greenville, North Carolina rally yesterday. Gabby, yesterday the President said that he's not enjoying the fight with Ilhan Omar and the rest of the squad, but he is, or he's not relishing it, but he is enjoying it. Is there a strategy behind what he's doing here?
There's absolutely a strategy, and it's being led primarily by his campaign. If you look at the first tweets that the president sent out that really sparked this entire controversy to begin with, they were not refined. They were not something that his campaign wanted him to say, and yet they took them and they sort of packaged it into this patriotic message, this claim that President Trump is the embodiment of capitalism and free markets, and he's running against these 4 progressive women who are just radically against America. That's the narrative that he is trying to advance, and we saw that with his rally last night. And I will say that one thing that was really important about this rally is it proved a lot of people wrong just in the past day. I've seen pundits and people who are skeptical of the Trump campaign say, well, surely this is going to alienate some of his supporters, and yet you heard them respond with a chant that goes directly to what he said originally in those tweets. So I think that this once again proves that he is in touch with his base, whether you agree with what he's saying or not. It's resonating with them, and it's something that they're eager to latch on to.
That's a good point.
Roger, I don't know who the people were who thought this was going to be a bad thing for him with his base. I mean, we saw polling right away that showed it actually his approval going up with Republicans post these, I would say, heinous comments. What did you make? Put us in a little bit of historical context here of that chant last night and that moment and what it means.
The phrase "send them back" or "send her back" or "send him back" is on the kind of life cycle of racist kind of language, so incredibly sophomoric, on the verge of infantile. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that 3rd and 4th graders say to each other on the playground. I mean, it is so debasing. I guess, I mean, if the formula works, then next he should tweet out like their home addresses, right? And say, hey, if you think they're un-American, go down, this is where they live. Go down and share it with them directly. Like, where does this go? Where does this end? Every time that we think there's a bottom, say, for example, continuing to insult John McCain after he's 6 feet under, the bottom just keeps getting redefined by the president. And this is a mile marker. When you ask about historical context, most of our presidents have been polite enough, and in fact most of the racists throughout our country's history have been polite enough to hide it under some level of polite society kind of language, right? Like when I would be running around and I was working for Barack, I'd meet people at weddings and they'd be like, I just don't know if he's traditional. Meaning, I mean, we all know what that means.
Right.
Woodrow Wilson was kind enough to keep a lid on his anti-Semitism 100 years ago and managed to govern without it seeping into the public sphere. And even when you listen to the tapes of Reverend Graham bantering anti-Semitically with President Nixon in the Oval Office, at least they're operating at that point under the idea that they're in private. But to turn around and extrovert this and to turn that fire hose into and train it on the American public, I think is tremendously disheartening. This is a mile marker in American history, and people need to decide what side they're on.
One thing I want to get you in here on, Gabby, which is how is it that the Democrats can best respond to this? So we've seen the resolution in the House. We've seen the impeachment proceedings filed by Al Green, who we talked to earlier in the show. Is the coalescing around Ilhan Omar and the rest of the squad? Do you think that that's something that kind of plays into the Trump campaign strategy here?
It depends on which part of the Democratic base you ask, because if you ask, liberal progressives, of course they are going to say that having these 4 women elevated to the point where they're doing, interviews as the squad with CBS, it is a good thing for the party. They want them to be the face of the party, and they believe that their policies are the best way to steer the Democrats forward. But if you ask people like House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, she, of course, is very hesitant to embrace what's happening right now with Democrats. She didn't want that impeachment impeachment proceeding vote to take place. She doesn't want these 4 women to be the face of the Democratic Party. And so I do think that the more that we elevate them, the more that we're talking about the squad, the more it works in the president's favor. Of course, he runs the risk of saying something else like he did in these tweets. And I think the further that he goes down that path, the more he can be accused of being an Islamophobe or a racist. That is what puts him at risk with his campaign.
Because he cannot win with just his base. I mean, you cannot win with just the base alone. He's got to get a little bit more than that. I mean, my own personal view is this group of 4 women knows how to do combat in the new media era in a better way than anyone else. So put the ideology aside. They know how to grab the media attention. They know how to generate energy and enthusiasm. I think that's something to be celebrated for the Democratic Party. But Roger, I wanted to also hear about, you've got a column set to post on the Hill, questioning whether the president is still the leader of the free world. What's the case that you're making?
Basically, to be a leader requires actually leading, right? And that requires being a steward and carrying the torch of the Western democratic experiment, which is based on the idea of free citizenry who are capable and able to exercise self-determination, that can criticize the government, that has a free press, that is constantly trying to expand the rights of the individual, and that the sovereign individual is the engine of a healthy society. That's the essence of the Western democratic experiment. And if you take each of those as a laundry list and go down them, when you look at the president and his behavior on the global stage, and now we're into our 3rd or 4th G8 or G20, so this is no longer anomalies. You know, like as they say in economics, 2 points is a line, 3 points is a trend. We get into our 3rd G8 or G20, and look who he is just physically most comfortable around. He is at ease around the very worst players on the global stage, and in fact even expresses envy for the capacity that they have in their own country to jail journalists and dissidents. I mean, when you factor that into the historical continuum of all of the presidents in our country, especially since America took the world stage 100 years ago in the aftermath of World War I, even if I disagreed with them, I still felt that they were stewards of that fundamental kind of compass of trying to advance the Western democratic experiment. And I think when you go through this in a laundry list fashion on every single count, this president comes up short, which leaves me saying that for the first time in my life, the president of the United States is not the leader of the free world.
Final thing I just want to get in here, which is, Gabby, I know you've covered Trump for a really long time. I believe he's addressed this in the Warsaw speech and the administration broadly. How do they view their stewardship, I guess, of the Western world?
You mean the president and his administration?
And his team.
He got asked about, the Western liberalism. He thought we meant literally San Francisco Democrats, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a great example, of his outlook. He doesn't take foreign affairs and foreign policy as seriously as he does domestic policy because it doesn't resonate with his base as much. But if you do look at his outlook, I mean, he goes into these meetings, the G20s, the G7s, feeling as though he is the leader of the free world, thinking that he is and that he holds all the power. And you've seen that play out during I believe it was the G7 in Canada a year ago, where you had that sort of infamous picture of President Trump leaning on the table and all of the other foreign leaders waiting for him to say something. That is a picture that he looks at and he feels emboldened. And I think it makes him think and his administration think that they can sort of carry out whatever agenda they believe in without consequence.
Power is different than leadership. Gabby and Roger, stick with us. We're going to have more with Team Rising just after this.